quick word from you, Rahul. If there are any other refugee groups who have received similar treatment, who have been rehabilitated by the center in a similar fashion in the past?
You see, there were larger numbers, Nabila, at one time. You see, we have had major migrations at one time from Bangladesh. We have had migrations from people coming from Afghanistan, for example. A large number of people from Afghanistan, Afghan nationals, are here in India as refugees. And they are covered, those covered by the UNHCR are a very different category, and the government has to make arrangements for them. Now, these are obligations that a sovereign has to make if it is part of the United Nations. And that is why that categorization, there are legal refugees and there are illegal refugees. One should not confuse these two issues, that these Myanmar nationals who are called Rohingyas here are the ones which are being considered today as legal refugees who have sought asylum in India, and now there is a problem of accommodating them and instead of putting them. If you recall, a few days back, there was a fire in which a lot of Rohingya tents were gutted. Now, that became a problem in terms of our international obligations, that the refugees were in a condition that their houses caught fire and they were facing problems. Now, what the VHP and the RSS are trying to do is mixing the issue of Rohingya refugees or the Myanmarese refugees with those of people of Hindu origin who have come from Pakistan facing persecution. Now, these are also, for that also, certain laws have been created and that issue is being taken care of. But definitely, the political template which emerges here is bad news for the BJP, because its siblings in the Sangha Parivar, RSS and the VHP, are protesting against the move by the center, of which the center is a party, because largely center has to take care of the global commitments or international commitments like the UN and others, in which the Delhi government is largely the one who is the facilitator.
Right. You know, from what we understand and what you just mentioned there, I'd like to repeat here that the Rohingyas who have been considered, as Rahul said, that they're looked at as legal refugees. They are being rehabilitated, but they're not being given ownership of those EWS flats. If there's misconception or miscommunication, that's now been cleared, that these Rohingya Muslims who are being rehabilitated by the center, they are not being given ownership of those flats, but just will be placed with and given basic amenities, and the government only following the UN's guidelines on how to place refugees, considering that Rohingyas are looked at as legal immigrants. That's more or less what we gather. In fact, do tell us, Rahul, at this point, the VHP and the RSS, both very upset with the way the BJP has taken a U-turn on this, and rightly so, because it's not just about them being upset without basis here. It was the BJP indeed who echoed this sentiment extensively, that the Rohingya Muslims are a threat to national security, they're a burden to the country, they're illegal, etc. They created this or painted this color of Rohingya Muslims so much so that it's very surprising at this point that they've taken this whole U-turn to rehabilitate them and give them basic amenities. If this was anyway the stance that they should be taking, ideally, then what really happened in the past when when the chorus was growing on how they're a national security threat to the national security?
See, Nabila, what happens that usually when you are in opposition, political issues are magnified by political parties. And if you see the RSS, the BJP and the VHP and the other affiliates in the organization, one finds that there has been a very sustained campaign for the last several decades as far as refugees who come from outside India who are Muslim. Now, they have always been termed as illegal immigrants in the country, and there was a climate in the country where there have been laws created by the government and then repealed by Parliament as far as the determination of who exactly is a refugee. Now, the NRC, the CAA, a lot of these are consecutive legislations created in the country primarily for such purposes. But here the problem is that the BJP and the RSS and others have taken the protest against Rohingyas as a minority group which is minority migrated into India as a political campaign. Now, any attempt by the government to meet its international obligations runs against the government's actions or the BJP's political stance earlier in the past. Because if you recall, even Home Minister Amit Shah on the floor of the House had stated very clearly that Rohingyas will not be given any kind of permanence as far as their status in India is concerned. And that is why this news about Rohingyas being provided permanent shelter is being taken or interpreted more as that their stay in India is getting some degree of permanence. And while now the clarifications are like the Ministry, Hardeep Puri's office is likely to issue a clarification.
Right. You know, if there is a clarification from the government, we'd like to hear it. Of course, we continue to track those developments here. But from what we see, the government sources saying that these Rohingyas are not going to be given ownership of those apartments. They're only rehabilitated under the UN's guidelines on how to place refugees in the country.